So today I am going to be taking a look at the front end on this Arctic Cat TRV500 quad. And I was out hunting a couple weekends ago, and while I was out I noticed that I am getting a squeak coming from the front end every single time the tires rotate. And I don't know whether or not it is the bearing inside the wheel or inside the axle, or whether or not it is the caliper or the brake or the rotor or something like that rubbing. But right now, if I take the wheel and I start spinning it, it immediately stops, and there's a bit of a squeak to it on both sides. So I need to pull both of these tires off the front end here. Well, this one's quite a bit tighter. You can definitely hear the squeaking. So I'm going to pull these front tires off here, and I'm going to take a look at the brake pads as well as the rotor, just to see if there's any scoring at all, because it could very well just be some brake pads that I need to replace. Otherwise, it could turn out to be a much bigger job if it is nothing to do with the brakes. So I am going to pause the video now, and I am going to pull both of these front tires off. I do have the quad here up on jack stands so far, so we're okay to pull these front tires off at this point, and we'll take a look. All right, so I pulled the front wheels off, and I can, well, there's not very much a light in here. Hopefully this is going to turn out. But anyways, I'm just looking at the rotor right now, and I actually run my finger on the rotor here. I can feel a lot of scoring into the rotor. So that leads me to believe that something is rubbing on that rotor, because those are some pretty deep score marks on this side as well. And what about this side here? That's not too bad on this side. So what I'm going to do is I am going to pull the calipers off, and I'm going to take a look at the brake pads on this guy, because I believe it is probably brake pads. That is a bit of a score mark there, but it is nothing out of the ordinary. I can kind of see some of the brake pad wear right there, but it's best to just pull that caliper off and get a full visual inspection of it there, just so that I can determine both the front and back shoes of the brake and what kind of condition they are actually in. So I'm going to pause the video again, and I am going to pull the caliper off on here. So to do so, we've got two nuts, one right here and then one just right down here. You probably can't see with my hand in the way, but anyways, I just gotta back those nuts off, and it will take the entire brake assembly off here, which has the calipers inside of it, and we'll take a look at the brake shoes or the brake pads. Okay, so I have pulled the brake assembly with the calipers off of the rotors now, and it was unbelievable how loose they actually were in there. So that leads me to believe that if they weren't sitting in there very firmly, that they may have been moving around, and that is what could have caused some of the scratching on the rotor itself. But after I've taken the caliper off, I no longer hear any squeaking, so that is a good sign, which means that my bearings are most likely okay, and there's definitely some tension in here, but that's just because it's going into that transfer case there, and that just doesn't sit very, nothing's going to spin very freely through the transfer case as far as I know. So let's take a look at the brake pads here. So let's figure out how we get these guys off, which is just going to be pushing this caliper piston in with my fingers. And it looks like there is a spacer on one side, but it is missing the spacer on the other side. So this little rubber spacer, oh, where's my finger? So rubber spacer between here and there. So let's see. Let's pull these brake pads off. I'm just gonna put my phone down for a sec. It's gonna use both hands. Come on. Might need to grab a clamp. Yeah, I'm gonna have to grab a clamp to push those guys in so that I can just get the brake pads off. So I will pause the video and I'm just gonna clamp that and pull both brake shoes off, or brake pads. All right, so I have pulled the brake shoes off, and I can definitely see that there is not much pad left on these guys. So I am definitely going to need to replace these brake shoes out. That is most likely what has been causing my scraping sound. I may also actually be able just to sand these guys down a little bit, just to flatten the surface up on them a little bit. But there are some little I guess fingers in the pads that will cause a squeaking in your brake from the brake rubbing on the rotor once it's time to replace them. And I just didn't really click into that maybe it was about time that these brakes needed to be replaced. So that is what I need to do here, is on both sides, or at least both front brakes, I need to replace the pads, which is only a couple bucks. And we'll take a look once the pads have been replaced, and we'll figure out whether or not the brakes are squeaking anymore, which I assume they probably aren't going to be. As far as the rotor, with all the scoring in it, I'm not sure yet whether or not I am actually going to take this axle nut off, or I guess whatever this nut is called here, and get access to the rotor there and just kind of sand it a bit. But I don't really want to screw around with that right now. We'll just replace the pads for now and go from there. Anyways, so we've figured out that the brake shoes or the brake pads need to be replaced, and I think that will solve the issue of the squeaking on the front end here, and it should make my life a lot easier when I'm out hunting, because I won't be scaring the animals off 2 kilometers away from my current position. Anyways, that is all I had to say.